Middle East Report on Sabahul Muslim.
James, good morning. I hope you're well. Welcome.
Good morning. All is well. Good to be with you.
So the UAE Foreign Minister Abdullah bin Ziyad visited Israel this week to mark the second anniversary of the establishment of diplomatic relations between the two countries. Yet, one part of that deal, that's the sale of the F-35 planes, America's most advanced fighter jet, is still on hold.
Indeed. The visit was indeed to mark the second anniversary of diplomatic relations between the UAE and Israel. And it was very symbolic in many ways. Particularly given that Abdullah bin Zayed laid a wreath at the Holocaust Memorial, a recognition of the Holocaust during World War II, which is something that symbolically is extremely important, both to the Israelis, to the Jewish community worldwide, but also in terms of projecting the UAE in countries like the United States, but also in Europe. At the same time, part of the deal or the expectation when the diplomatic relations were established was that the UAE would be able to buy F-35 fighter jets, which is basically the world's most advanced fighter plane. And the issue always has been with arms sales to Arab countries that the United States wish to maintain Israel's military edge, and this would obviously narrow that. Now, the Israelis did not object to the sale. On the contrary, they favored it, given that the dynamics, of course, in relations between Israel and various Arab states have changed. But that sale is still on hold. And it's on hold primarily for two reasons. One is that the United States wants to ensure that or they're trying to use the sale as leverage in terms of binding the UAE to a U.S. digital world rather than a Chinese digital world. So that goes to issues of 5G and eventually 6G mobile communications, but also would want to ensure that the UAE continues to build its military capabilities on the basis of Western, particularly American, but also French or British weaponry. And that is something that the UAE until now has been reluctant to guarantee.
Now, Saudi Arabia has sentenced two tribesmen to 50 years in prison for protesting against the confiscation of their land to make way for Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman's $500 million Neom science fiction city.
Indeed. So what we've seen since the visit in July to the kingdom by U.S. President Joe Biden is an extreme increase in the sentences that are being handed down to people who are being viewed as dissenters. So we've seen two women in recent months being sentenced to sentences of 34 and 45 years in prison for a tweet. And now what we're seeing is you have Neom, which is sort of the crown jewel in Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman's economic diversification plans. This is essentially a science fiction city, a lateral building that will go hundreds of miles, and so on and so forth. To build that city, a tribe has to be displaced. And there were clashes last year in which tribesmen were killed by security forces. And now you've seen that this extension of these extreme sentences with two tribesmen being convicted to 50 years in prison because they protested against the confiscation of their lands and really only a minimal compensation, often only $3,000.
Now, Egypt, Saudi Arabia and Qatar are among the newly recognized dialogue partners of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, whose leaders are meeting in the Uzbek capital of Tashkent.
Indeed. So the Shanghai Cooperation Organization is an organization that was founded in the 1990s It groups China, Russia, most of the Central Asian former Soviet republics, India and Pakistan. At the meeting that opened yesterday and will continue today, Iran is being accepted as a member, which fortifies its relationships with Russia and China. And Saudi Arabia, Qatar, and Egypt are being accepted as what are called dialogue partners. Now, this is important in terms of relationships between the Gulf states or the Arab states and China and Russia. It's one more linkage between them. And of course, that organization could take on greater importance if we go through to a really bifurcated world between the United States and China. On the other hand, in many ways, the SCO is a forum rather than an institutionalized organization that comparable to other regional organizations, whether that's the Gulf Cooperation Council, the European Union, the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, still has a long way to go before it becomes an organization that in its own right will have heft and depth.
And then finally, hopes fade for any nuclear deal with Iran, at least before Israeli and U.S. elections in November?
Indeed. So we've gone through a roller coaster in recent weeks and months with regard to the revival of the 2015 international agreement that curbed Iran's nuclear program. At various points, it was assumed that the negotiations were more or less at a successful conclusion. Now we're back to differences between the parties. The Iranian president, just in the last hours, has sort of set down his conditions in an interview with Al Jazeera, in which he said that the sanctions have to be lifted in advance, and the issue about safeguards involving the International Atomic Energy Agency have to be resolved before the agreement could be revived. There's some debate about what this all means. The pessimists will tell you that increasing the agreement or the revival of the agreement is dead in the water. More likely is that nobody really wants to take a decision prior to the November 1 elections in Israel and the question of whether or not the former Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu will return to power, and the U.S. midterm elections, which will determine to what degree the Democratic Party and Biden maintain a majority in the houses of Congress, whereby the feeling at the moment is that the Democrats may well retain control of the Senate, but not control of the House. And obviously that would have implications for the durability of that agreement in terms of U.S. willingness to adhere to it.
All right, James, thank you so much for your time as always.
It's always a pleasure to be with you.
Listeners can check out James's articles on www.jamesmdorsey.net.